Joining me in studio now to unpack this judgment further of the High Court on the former President Jacob Zuma's medical parole matter is our senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo. Ziyanda, thank you very much for your time. I think what's playing in my mind right now, and the picture I have in my face, is that of the leadership of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. This has been a hot political potato, to use the phrase. What might be they thinking right now?
Well, at least the local government elections are over and done with. I think that was the main headache of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, and the decline thereof in that province by the ANC is proof of that. Of course, there are many factors that would have contributed to that electoral decline. But I think, Koli, to add to what you're saying, what I'm thinking about is those reports that said that President Cyril Ramaphosa was aware of the decision to grant former President Jacob Zuma medical parole. I'll tell you why this is important, because this is going to have political implications, not just in KwaZulu-Natal, but next year going into an elective conference. You think of the ANC. There still has to be an NGC that's held, a consultative conference, but also remembering that report by the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal that many said was or could have been interpreted as very disparaging towards the judiciary of this country. You recall, you actually did an interview with him, about this. But also, remembering, Koli, this has to be placed within the right context. Yeah. That the former president was incarcerated in July. Then we saw civil unrest in parts of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng as a result of the arrest of the former president in part. Yeah. And then not long after that, the former president, after serving less than 2 months at the Escort Correctional Facility, is granted medical parole. All the while, even when looking at the arms deal matter, his health had come into question, where the NPA's doctors had found that there's nothing wrong with the former president that would not make him fit to stand trial. Yeah. Whereas the military health doctors had said that he is terminally ill and would be ill for the next 6 months. So this is where now the issues of substantive and procedural issues are raised in this particular court judgment, Koli.
Ziyanda, you mentioned that the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, would have been aware of steps to release former President Jacob Zuma on medical parole. I've just asked Carl Niehaus, a fervent supporter of the former president, whether they expect the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, to appeal this decision, in fact, to actually defend the decision of Arthur Fraser. And his answer is very clear. Yes, we do expect, but if it doesn't, then it's going to prove that indeed there is, quote unquote, as Carl said, prejudice towards people like the former president, towards people like Ace Magashule, by not only the country's judiciary, but the executive. The interplay, Ziyanda, between party and state, that the ANC has always said, look, we are very cognizant of this. But does that again get muddied in this period? As you mentioned, we're heading towards a very critical point, and that is the elective conference of the ANC in December next year.
And it doesn't help, Koli, that Ronald Lamola is in the CR camp, as it were, that he is someone who's deemed to be aligned to President Cyril Ramaphosa. So hence you will see the politicking by Carl Niehaus saying that they expect Ronald Lamola as Justice Minister because they are wanting to see whether or not there's fairness in these processes to appeal this decision. I recall quite distinctly that both the Justice Ministry and I'd say even the Correctional Services spokesperson, Ziyanda Ngcobo, not really wanting to venture into the reasons for the granting of this medical parole, whether or not this decision would be made public, as the DA and Helen Suzman Foundation had actually, requested, recalling that, in order to be granted medical parole, you either need to be terminally ill or physically incapacitated. And Ziyanda Ngcobo not wanting to be drawn into which one of these two the former president was faced with, but also the Justice Department really saying, well, actually, we won't comment because, you know, which is true, the National Commissioner of Correctional Services has a prerogative according to the law to actually grant medical parole. That's not in question here. That's also something that even this judgment acknowledges. What is in question here is, of course, the severity of the illness of the former president. Is he physically incapacitated or terminally ill? Who determined that either one of those two things? And actually, why then did Arthur Fraser go against a suggestion, a recommendation by the Medical Parole Board that he shouldn't be granted medical parole, given the fact that, not forgetting as well who Arthur Fraser is, you know, in the bigger scheme of things in politics. He was appointed by the former president in 2016. He's been accused before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry of setting up parallel intelligence networks that would serve, you know, the political, would be for the political benefit of the then president, you know, President Jacob Zuma. So these things are all interlinked, Goli, and I think what is going to be a point of contention going forward is order number 5, which is the one you've been speaking about this morning, about the fact that the medical parole time that the former president has served will not count as a part of the 15-month sentence. Already questions around whether or not that is also a fair decision to have made.
There are so many implications around this matter, Ziyanda, given the figure we're talking about here, former President Jacob Zuma, who is clearly a very influential figure, particularly in KZN. And I say this because there was a grouping of the eThekwini councillors who went to Nkandla
just last week.
And there are others who obviously were not part of that. There are regional conferences of the ANC that are ongoing, that must take place in KZN. So there are going to be implications politically. But for me, I think where, as an ordinary member of this country, we should be concerned is the evidence that has come out of the Human Rights Commission of Inquiry into what happened in July. The state of play within the country's law enforcement apparatus. You can see that there are clear divisions between the minister and his commissioner. There are those who have even suggested that the commissioner, a whole national commissioner of the South African police, is in the camp of the former president Jacob Zuma. That simply cannot sit well with ordinary citizens. The simple question, and we are out of time, simple question, might what we saw in July play up, or at least attempt to play up again, and how prepared are our law enforcement?
It's a very tough question to answer, but the simple way to respond is yes, it's very possible that what we saw in July could happen again now. If we are to just assess and analyze what's come out of those Human Rights Commission hearings, it's very clear that they were caught off guard. Intelligence and the police are not working together. Even within the police crime intelligence sector, they themselves are also divided. And these are all the ramifications of what was deliberately done over several years to actually now politicize agencies and organizations that are meant to be serving you and I as citizens, and instead we're serving political benefits and gains of the elite.
Ziyanda Ngcobo is our senior politics reporter. Thank you very much for that political analysis. We're delving into the background based on what has happened, facts.